I never meant for any of this to happen. If you told me months ago that a stupid dare would turn into the most painful, transformative chapter of my life, I would have laughed in your face. But that night, it all started with laughter. I remember it vividly. The clinking of glasses, the dim bar lights reflecting off my friend's sequin top, the thrum of music that made conversation feel like a secret shared between beats. Go on, Lyra, Marcy had smirked, chin propped on her manicured hand. You always talk about confidence. Prove it. See that guy over there? The quiet one by himself. Bet you can't get his number. And the others had giggled, eyes sparkling with mischief. I rolled mine, pretending to be unbothered. You're ridiculous, I'd said, but my pulse had already picked up. I wasn't about to back down, not when the challenge was laid bare like that. I've always been competitive, always needed to win. So I stood up, smoothed my dress, and crossed the room toward him. He was sitting alone, scrolling through his phone, his expression unreadable, but soft in a way that drew me in. When he looked up, our eyes met, and I swear something flickered there. Not just curiosity, but warmth. Hey, I said, forcing a flirty tone. You look like you could use a little company. He blinked, as if unsure whether I was talking to him. Yeah, sure, he said quietly. His voice was gentle, almost hesitant. Good, I grinned, sliding into the seat beside him. I'm Lyra. You are. Ethan. There was a pause. I didn't know what I expected, some cocky reply, a playful comeback, but he just smiled nervously, scratching the back of his neck. It was kind of cute. I almost forgot why I was there. I leaned in, making it seem effortless. So, Ethan, give me your number. Let's go on a date. His brows shot up, like I'd just told him the sky was purple. But after a long moment, he nodded. Okay, he said softly, pulling out his phone. His brows shot up, like I'd just told him the sky was purple. But after a long moment, he nodded. Okay, he said softly, pulling out his phone. I took it, typed in my number, and flashed him a triumphant smile. Behind me, I could feel my friends watching, giggling, whispering. It was supposed to end there. A silly dare, a number in my phone, a story to laugh about later. But it didn't. He texted me that night, a simple, awkward, "It was nice meeting you." And against all logic, I replied. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe curiosity. But soon, one message became 2, then 10. Before I knew it, we were talking about everything: books, music, late-night thoughts neither of us had ever said out loud. By the time we had our first date, I already knew the sound of his laugh, the way he hesitated before sending a message, as if choosing his words carefully. That night, sitting across from him at the little cafe downtown, I caught myself smiling like an idiot. I told myself it was still just for fun. A dare stretched too far. Nothing serious. But when he laughed, it wasn't the shallow laughter of guys I used to entertain. It was genuine. Warm. And when he looked at me, really looked, I felt seen. I wrote about it that night in my diary, still pretending it was a game. Dear Diary, today my friends dared me to approach this guy and get his number. Poor sucker. He doesn't even know it was just a challenge. But he's kinda sweet. I don't know. Maybe I'll see where this goes. I mean, what's the harm in that? But I didn't expect what came next. 3 dates later, I was the one asking him to be my boyfriend. The dare had long since lost its humor, replaced by something terrifyingly real. And when he said yes, smiling in that quiet, bashful way of his, my chest ached with something new. Something I didn't want to name. I had no idea that single decision, the one I made to win a stupid bet, would one day destroy both of us. The first few months were perfect. Or maybe that's what made everything hurt so much later, how real it had felt. Ethan was the kind of man who noticed the smallest things. He'd remember that I liked extra sugar in my coffee, or that I hated loud places, because they made me feel like I was disappearing in the noise. He'd send random good morning messages that somehow always matched the weather, like he could read the day before it began. We had movie nights at his place, long walks through the park, and quiet evenings filled with shared silences that didn't need words. He wasn't flashy or loud, but he had this rare kind of calm that made me feel safe. For once, I didn't need to perform. I could just exist. Sometimes I'd look at him and wonder how something that started as a dare could feel so much like destiny. I had meant to tell him the truth at least once or twice. The guilt gnawed at me, especially when he'd hold my hand and say things like, "You're different, Lyra. I've never met someone like you." But every time, my throat would tighten. How could I tell him that his different girl had only walked up to him because of a stupid bet? I hoped it would never matter. Because what we had was real now, wasn't it? But then, suddenly, he changed. It started small. Missed calls. Shorter texts. That bright spark in his eyes when he looked at me gone, replaced with something heavy, distant. At first, I thought he was just tired. Maybe work stress. But when I asked, he brushed it off with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everything's fine, Lyra," he'd say. But it wasn't. The next time we met, his touch felt colder. When I reached for his hand, he let it fall away too quickly. He'd sit beside me but not really with me, like his body was there, but his mind was someplace else entirely. I tried to joke, to tease, to pull him back into that easy warmth we used to have, but he barely responded. "Ethan, did I do something wrong?" I finally asked one evening as we walked back from dinner. The streetlights painted his face in pieces, half light, half shadow. He hesitated, then said softly, "No. You didn't. That was all. Nothing more." But his silence screamed louder than any words could. The days that followed were torture. I replayed everything in my head, every conversation, every glance, every small thing I might have said or done to push him away. He wasn't cruel, just absent. Like someone had flipped a switch inside him and dimmed every feeling we'd shared. I texted, called, begged to talk, but his replies were short. Eventually, they stopped altogether. When I showed up at his place, desperate for answers, he barely looked at me. "Maybe we should take a break," he said, his tone too calm, too controlled. The words hit harder than I expected. "A break?" I repeated, my throat burning. "Why?" He shook his head. "I just need some space, Lyra." "But I don't understand," I said, tears starting to slip through despite myself. "If I did something, just tell me." "Please," he whispered. "Don't make this harder." That was the moment something inside me cracked. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to shake the truth out of him, but all I could do was nod. My pride wouldn't let me beg. "Fine," I said quietly. "If that's what you need." I moved back into my apartment that night. The space felt empty, colder than I remembered. I packed the few things I'd left at his place, my sweater, my toothbrush, a few books, and tried not to cry as I locked the door behind me. The first night alone, I told myself he'd call. The second, that he was just sorting things out. By the third, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. He wasn't coming back. I cried until my body ached, until I couldn't feel anything except the hollow space he used to fill. And then, on the fourth morning, as I was unpacking what little I'd brought home, I found it, tucked neatly into my bag, right between a book and a scarf. My diary. I froze. I'd left it at his apartment, on the bedside table. I hadn't even realized. The cover was scuffed from years of being carried around, and across it, in my messy handwriting, were the words, "Do not open this book. Personal reflections ahead. If you do so, you're a bitch. You bitch. Yes, you." I laughed bitterly through the tears that burned my eyes. Typical me, sarcastic even in privacy. I pressed it against my chest and wondered if he'd seen it. God, I hope not. That diary held everything: the truth, the dare, the growing guilt. If he'd read even one page. But no, Ethan wasn't that kind of person. He wouldn't invade my privacy. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. 3 days passed. 3 long, sleepless, miserable days. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned, cooked, rearranged furniture, even went jogging for the first time in months, but every quiet moment just brought me back to him. His laughter echoing in my head, his touch, his warmth. And that silence, that horrible silence. I wanted to hate him for how easily he'd walked away, but I couldn't. My heart didn't know how. Then one night, just as I was trying to convince myself to eat something, I got a message. From him. "I left something at your place. It's probably nothing important." Nothing important. It took me a few seconds to realize what he meant, the diary. My stomach turned. He'd found it. I wanted to believe he hadn't read it, that maybe he was just trying to be polite, to make sure I knew it was there. But something about the way he'd phrased it, detached, formal, almost resigned, made me feel cold all over. I stared at that diary for hours. It sat on the table, closed but heavy, as if daring me to open it and face what I didn't want to know. The part of me that feared the truth whispered that he had read it. And if he had, then I understood everything. The sudden distance. The strange calm. The quiet, painful goodbye. I picked it up, running my fingers over the cover, tracing the crude words I'd written months ago. You bitch. Yes. You. My heart pounded. I opened it. The pages were bent in places, not in the way I left them. The corners creased, some folded slightly. My breath caught. He had read it. My chest constricted, a mix of dread and guilt flooding through me. I flipped to the first entry, the one that had started everything. Dear Diary, today my friends dared me to approach this guy and get his number. Poor sucker. He doesn't even know it was just a challenge. But he's kinda sweet. I'll take his number and ghost him later. Just for fun. Reading it made my stomach twist. I could imagine exactly how it must have felt for him to see those words, to realize the beginning of what we had wasn't real. It didn't matter that everything after was. That the laughter, the kisses, the way I fell in love with him, it had all become true. He had seen the start, the part that made me look like a monster. I turned the page. Day 2, okay. Maybe I judged too fast. He's cute, and there's something about how he talks. It's genuine, like he means every word. Maybe I'll keep texting for a bit. What's the harm? Then, Day 5, we talked for hours last night. He told me about his mom's illness, how he stayed home to take care of her instead of going abroad. I don't know why, but that made me ache. He's not like the others. I keep telling myself this is still a joke, but my heart doesn't listen. By the time I reached the middle of the diary, I was crying silently, tears splattering onto the ink. Each page was like a confession I hadn't realized I'd written. Every word screamed I love him without ever saying it directly. And now it was all ruined. He must have read it all, the dare, the doubt, the guilt, the love, and instead of confronting me, he chose silence. Distance. Punishment through absence. I wanted to scream, to drive to his apartment and beg him to just talk to me. To tell him that the dare had died the moment I met his eyes, that everything since then was real. But I couldn't. Because if I went now, what would I even say? Sorry, the relationship you thought was pure started as a game? But I swear it became real later. Would I believe that if I were him? I clutched the diary to my chest and sank onto the couch, sobbing until my voice broke. The apartment felt like a tomb, filled with ghosts of laughter and warmth that had vanished too soon. I didn't sleep that night. My mind played loops of memories, his hand brushing mine in the cafe, the way he smiled into kisses, the day he told me I made him feel like home. And then, around dawn, one thought cut through the haze. He had to know the truth. Not through the diary, not through silence. From me. Because if I let him go without a fight, I'd always carry that weight, knowing that I'd broken something beautiful and never tried to mend it. So the next morning, with shaking hands and swollen eyes, I packed my bag and boarded a bus to his town. The entire ride, I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd explain, how I'd beg if I had to. My heart raced with every mile. When I finally stood outside his building, it felt like the world was holding its breath. I knocked. The door opened halfway, and there he was. Ethan. He looked exhausted. His eyes were puffy, his hair messy, as if he hadn't slept either. For a split second, I saw something flicker there, pain, regret, but it vanished just as quickly. Lyra? His voice was quiet, almost fragile. My throat closed up. Every speech I'd practiced vanished. Ethan, please, just hear me out. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he shook his head. I can't, he said softly. Not right now. And he closed the door. I stood there for a long time after, my knuckles pressed to the wood, my chest trembling with words I couldn't say. He didn't want to see me. But I wasn't giving up. Not yet. I don't know how long I stood outside his door. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. The world blurred around me, the hum of cars, the chatter of people on the street, all fading beneath the weight pressing on my chest. I'd come all this way for a door to close in my face. By the time I made it back to my apartment, night had swallowed the city. I sank onto my couch, clutching my diary like it could anchor me to what little remained of us. The silence was unbearable. I opened a blank page and started to write, though my hands shook so badly the pen nearly slipped. Ethan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to say what I couldn't at your door. I'm sorry. For the dare, for the lie it started with, for not being brave enough to tell you sooner. What began as a joke turned into the most real thing in my life. I fell for you completely, helplessly, and maybe I deserve the pain of losing you. But I need you to know that nothing about how I feel now is fake. I kept writing, the words spilling faster, truer, about how much he'd changed me, how his kindness had cracked open parts of me I didn't even know existed, how every entry in that stupid diary had turned from mockery to confession. When I was done, I folded the letter carefully, staring at the creases like they could hold my heart together. Then, in a moment of pure impulse, I came up with the most ridiculous, desperate idea I'd ever had. If he wouldn't open the door for my words, maybe, just maybe, he'd open his heart to music. So, the next evening, I called in a favor from a friend who knew people, musicians, the kind who played under balconies for lovers who couldn't find the right words. A mariachi band, of all things. It sounded absurd, almost comedic, but maybe absurd was what love required now. By 10 o'clock, the street outside Ethan's apartment glowed under streetlights. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of night jasmine. I stood there, trembling as the band tuned their instruments. "Are you sure about this?" the lead guitarist asked, raising a brow. I nodded, clutching the folded letter in my hand. If I don't try, I'll regret it forever. When they began to play, the sound floated up, sweet and haunting. A slow, aching melody that carried everything I couldn't say out loud. People on nearby balconies peeked out, smiling, whispering. But I didn't care. My eyes were fixed on one window, his. For a while, there was nothing. The curtains didn't move. My chest ached with the weight of hope I was too scared to let go of. Then, slowly, the balcony door creaked open. Ethan stepped out, barefoot, his face half hidden in shadow. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, listening. The music swelled, echoing between the buildings, turning the quiet street into a stage for my apology. When the last notes faded, I took a deep breath, unfolded my letter, and turned it into a paper airplane. My hands shook so hard it nearly slipped, but I aimed for his balcony and let it fly. It soared clumsily through the air, bumping once against the railing before landing near his feet. He bent, picked it up. For a moment, our eyes met. My heart stuttered. But he didn't say anything, just looked at the letter, then back at me. Then, silently, he went back inside. The balcony door closed. The band packed up quietly, offering sympathetic smiles. "He'll read it," one of them said softly. I nodded, though I didn't believe it. Walking home felt like wading through water. Every step heavier than the last. I didn't cry, I was too tired for tears. But beneath the exhaustion, there was a fragile flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Because he hadn't ignored me completely. He'd come out. He'd listened. He'd taken the letter. And maybe, just maybe, that meant there was still a part of him that cared. That night, I sat by my window, staring at the stars, wondering if he was reading my words. If he felt the ache between each line. For the first time in days, I slept uneasily, but with the faint comfort that the story wasn't over yet. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling through the curtains and the strangest feeling in my chest, a mix of fear and anticipation. My phone buzzed once. A message. From him. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, hardly daring to breathe. After everything, after the silence, the distance, the music, those 3 words were enough to bring tears rushing to my eyes again. I typed back, my fingers trembling. Yes, anytime. And then I sat there, waiting for what came next, terrified and hopeful all at once. I arrived at his door an hour later, my bag slung over my shoulder, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it through the wood. The city seemed quieter than usual, almost respectful of what was about to happen. I rehearsed my words on the way up the stairs, but the closer I got, the more they dissolved into nothing. When Ethan opened the door, he looked calm, grounded, even. No tears, no anger, no dramatic storm of emotion. Just the steady, measured presence that had drawn me in months ago. It made my own shaking hands and racing chest feel all the more ridiculous. "Lyra," he said simply. I wanted to, my voice broke almost immediately, and I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill. I didn't want things to happen like this. I know I should have told you the truth sooner. Show. He held up a hand gently, cutting me off, not unkindly but firmly. I know. I blinked at him. You know. He nodded. I read the diary. His eyes didn't waver, didn't scold. They just met mine, steady and unwavering. I didn't want to confront you without thinking. I needed to process it. That's why I pulled away. I felt a wave of shame hit me. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't expect to. I didn't expect to feel what I feel for you. I never meant to hurt you. He stepped closer, closing the small distance between us. Lyra, I won't lie, what I read hurt. Not because I think you're a bad person, but because I always wanted something real, direct, something I could trust with my heart. And for a moment, I wondered if any of it had been real. The words stung like a sharp wind, but there was no venom in them. No blame. Just the truth. I let myself sink into the vulnerability I'd been holding back. I fell for you, I whispered. Completely. I know it started as a dare, but every moment after. I loved every single one. I swear, Ethan, it became real the moment I saw you laugh that first night. I wanted to protect it, to protect you, even if I was scared. He listened quietly, letting me spill it all out without interruption. When I finally ran out of breath, I slumped against the doorframe, my tears falling freely. He didn't flinch, didn't step back. He just reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I see why you did what you did, he said. But even though I understand, that doesn't make it acceptable to withhold the truth. You know that, right? I know, I said, choking back another sob. I was a coward. I was selfish. I wanted to protect myself from embarrassment, from rejection, from... I don't even know. I just know I hurt you. I see that now. He nodded slowly, still calm, still collected, still grounded. It hurt, he admitted. It shook me, made me question a lot. But I never stopped caring about you. That's why I came back. That's why I'm here. I looked up at him, my heart breaking and swelling at the same time. You still care? I do. His voice was quiet, but resolute. I've never stopped. Lyra, I won't lie, this isn't easy. What happened shook us. But I know what I want. I want you. And I don't want to lose what we have. I sank into his arms without thinking, my tears soaking into his shirt. He held me steady, grounding me in a way that made the chaos inside me start to settle. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I'll do anything to fix this. Anything. You don't have to say anything more right now, he murmured. Just be here with me. Let's start from now. We rebuild. I lifted my head and looked at him through blurred eyes. Can we really? We can, he said simply. His certainty was a balm to the whirlwind inside me. But it takes time. We'll take it slow. You need to know I forgive you. But I also need you to understand how deeply I was hurt. That's fair. I nodded, trembling, feeling both shame and relief wash over me. I do. I understand. And in that moment, wrapped in his steady presence, I finally believed we could make it work. The bitchy comments had saved me. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed.